Hello and welcome to this Blender guide on how I created the fantastic anime character Chainsaw Man. In today's video, I will show you my process for creating a 3D anime character from scratch using Blender. For the purposes of keeping the video length down, a lot of hours were spent on the modeling. I've chosen a selection of captures and sped them up to 400% speed. So if you want to watch a part that interests you the most and see more of the process, change the playback speed to 25%. You can use the timestamps in the video description to jump to any modeling stage. I've also added on-screen titles to each of the stages so that you can easily find parts that may be of particular interest to you. I've refrained from adding music and commentary to those parts of the video, ones that are sped up, so that you don't have to listen to a creepy slow voice and music. I don't want to give you nightmares. I haven't included texturing in this video because I would like to go back and make some improvements, but if you watch my hammer texturing video, I'll put a link in the description. I've pretty much used the same techniques in that video in this video. Approximately 30 minutes into the video, you will find short, real-time clips with commentary where I tackle key tasks and explain my thought process and techniques along the way. I really do encourage you to watch those. I think you could perhaps pick up a couple of tips there, hopefully. These include getting the teeth of the chainsaw to flow along the edge of the chainsaw without distorting, how I created the bendy bar, like the one used on top of his head, how I sculpted the inner parts of the mouth, how I modeled most, if not all, of the head parts using simple objects and modeling techniques you can use in any project, and how I made the neck cables, and finally, a short review of the head model. In fact, those sections start at the 33 minutes and 20 seconds mark if you want to jump straight to those. So with all that said, I hope you enjoy the content I create, and if you do, then you know what to do. Please consider leaving a like, subscribe, or share this with your friends, and maybe even leave a comment. It really helps support the channel and all of the work I put into my videos. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Let's take a look at how I made this bendy bar. It might seem pretty straightforward on the face of it, but I wanted to get to grips with the spin tool, so that's what I used in this instance. So what I've done is created a circle, mesh circle with 16 sides. And then in edit mode, I rotated that on the y-axis by 90 degrees, so that when I go to the front view, sit like this. Now we can go back into edit mode, select the spin tool just there, and when you click that, you will get this overlay on screen. Just like that. And if I click it, at the top there actually you can change need it to look like this. So select X, Y or Z until you see it looking like that. Now don't worry if this doesn't look like what you expect, which it doesn't clearly, but rather than moving the origin point there, or the 3D cursor, manipulate that in the actual spin tool options that popped up in the bottom left of Blender. So you can see there I changed the center Z for the center, the Z location, and the X location is already at 13. And just by doing that, you can then find the place that works for you to get the result that you wanted. So with that done, I selected the, well, I was going to extrude that, but in fact, I thought the best option at this stage was just to add a mirror modifier, which will align along the Z-axis, and of course the pivot point for the object is not in the right place, so I clicked here to select Effect Only Pivots, and I just moved that up, just somewhere like that will do, and then don't forget to turn that off. And with that done, I can apply the mirror modifier, and now I can bridge between these two edge rings just by selecting them, right click, and select Bridge Edge Loops. Just like that, nice and simple. And of course shade smooth. So right click with a object selected and choose shade smooth. If I could get the words out today. So with that done, I did another mirror modifier, but of course this time it's on the X-axis, which is where we want it in this particular instance anyway. And again, we don't have to use the change the pivot point, because we can actually use another object's pivot point as our mirror axis or reference point. So I'm just going to place the object where I want it to be. Then I selected the eyedropper and clicked on the head, I guess mask, or whatever you could shield there, and I'm using that object's center of origin basically, and that works perfectly. So that all I've got to do is align the object, and then you can apply the mirror modifier if you like at some point. I chose to just extrude that edge loop there, turn clipping on of course, so when they meet in the middle they stick together, just like that. And of course you can apply the mirror modifier, as I said. So in summary, this is how I made that bar. And once you've done that, you can easily select parts like the top part there, just move them up and down, and you can get different sizes and shapes. Very simple. Now let's have a look at how I made the bendy cables. I used a couple of techniques here, mostly the same technique, but one of them had an additional modifier using a curve. So you can see there's quite a lot of cables there. So they're all made with very simple geometry, just as basically a cylinder, a low resolution cylinder, which I then added a subsurface modifier to. So let's just take a look at this and see how we've done that. You can see there we've got a few modifiers added to the object. So the first one is the array, and you can see there if I turn the array off, obviously you just get the one shape added. Then I've added a simple deform modifier, which is set to bend, and then the axis of course and the angle that you set. And I added an additional one as well. So I've added two simple deform modifiers, just that I can have more control level which way the cable is facing and bending. And this one I've selected here is the same principle, but it's applied to a curve as well, because I wanted that twist to happen. So let's have a quick look at that. So we've got the subdivision surface modifier there. I've got the array again. Obviously we can control how long that goes on for. And then beneath that I've got the symbol deform again, which is in this instance a twist, not a bend, as you can see there. And then we also have a curve modifier, so that this object then follows this curve that I've added as well. So just by manipulating the curve points, you can then place, where the array is pointing towards and so on. So it's relatively straightforward. And of course, the order of the modifiers stack does make a difference. So if you find these don't work as you expected, maybe try changing the order of the stack in the modifiers. You can see that if I edit the points of the curve, it has an effect on the geometry along that curve. So quite a lot of cables there. So all using the same process, just rinse and repeat. Some of these are instances, some of them are bespoke objects. And here's a breakdown of what the object is. It's simply an 8-sided, or I think it's an 8-sided cylinder with a subdivision modifier applied to it. Very simple, just repeated. Of course, the pivot point is in the center of the geometry there. So there's the array applied. Then we have the symbol deform, which is the twist. And finally, we want that following a curve. So obviously add a curve, a Bezier curve, and then select it and apply it to that as a modifier. That's pretty much it. Now this next part is a little bit tricky, so I will try to do my best to explain it in as short as possible time. So what I've done here is, the principle is very much based around a Bezier curve again. So to illustrate that, I've added a curve, circle, just rotating that on the y-axis so it's facing the camera so you can see it clearer. And we're going to apply the scale just in case that makes a difference, but you should always get into the habit of applying the scale if you do edit resize an object in object mode. So now that we've done that, let's add a cone, I guess, just for illustration. Very simple cone, so 4 sides will do. This could be anything, of course. I'm just going to move that to the side for now. I'll explain why that's important, where you position these objects in relation to each other, because it does make a huge difference in how they interact. So with the cone selected, I've added an array, and excuse me, and if we just change that to the y-axis and then increase the separation between them, you can see there the array works fine. And now we add a curve modifier and click and select the curve, and that's the result. Not quite the result I'm expecting, but I would like to see the cones following the curve, right? That's what I want to see. So at this point I'm going to try and see if I change the axis or the factor, if that works. Maybe try constant offset, see what happens if we change that. Doesn't seem to help at all. So, do try these things, try some of the options available to you and see if you get the result that you expect. Now, the pivot point for that object, if I turn off these modifiers for a second, it has to be in the same position as the pivot for the circle, the Bezier circle. So what I'm going to do is select the cone and shift and select the circle last, and then shift S to bring up the pie menu, and then select selection to active, and that will move the cone to the active element, which is the circle. Now they're in the same position, but we're still not getting the result that we want. So again, let's try and change some of these options in the curve modifier. Perhaps increase the count if you want to see more of the object along the array. Let's give it some more spacing. Now that's actually working, that's what we want. But the cone is facing the wrong way. It's not facing vertically like we've modeled it. So what I'm going to do is go into edit mode and see if this makes a difference. Just rotate it 90 degrees on one of the axes. And that's looking right now. That is the cone as an array along the curve. And it's going all around the circle, which is what we want. However, the big problem is it's all distorted, unfortunately. So we need to do a little bit of a trick here. And if I can refer you to Artisans of Vol, another excellent Blender channel, where he's actually illustrated this technique, and that's where I've learnt this technique from. So I'll put a link in the description to his video if I remember to do that. Hopefully I do. So basically what I'm doing here is added a plane. This could be anything, it doesn't have to be a plane. And I'm selecting the cone. Just get rid of the modifiers on the cone. And I've added all of those modifiers, or copied them from the cone before I deleted them, to the plane that we've just created. Again, we want to place the plane in the same position as the circle. I'm just going to scale this down just so we can see it better. So that's working as expected. But we don't want the plane on the circle, we want the cone. Of course, we don't want it to be distorted. So what you can do now is select the cone, select the plane, and then parent the cone to the plane. And that is now the child to the plane. So if we move the plane, you can see the cone moves with it. Obviously the cone moves on its own because it's the child. So that with that done, let's just make sure they're all in the same position, which they are. Now we select the plane. Just making sure that it's in the same position again there, which it is. Now if you go to this option here, the object options, under instancing, click on faces. And that will magically take the child faces, which is the cone, and apply that where the plane is repeated. Obviously if we turn off the plane, or the cone, so we hide it from the render, you're not going to see it. So there is a bit of a catch to this technique, in that you have to basically bake the whole instancing as separate objects effectively, which is what I had to do with the teeth on the chainsaw. So as you can imagine, I had a lot of teeth on the chainsaw, the large ones and the intermediate ones, the smaller teeth. So what you have to do is select that option there, make instances real, and that will then take what you've just created and apply it, bake it into these objects basically. And that is now frozen in those positions. So now the wheel isn't being used at all, the circle. And now you can see there we've got all these separate cones in the outliner. Now let's take a look at how I made the majority, if not all, of the head parts. I do this technique, I use these techniques a lot because they just work and they're very simple to learn and understand. So here's, as an example, here's one of the parts. As you can see, I've got a mirror modifier there, just to repeat it on the other side. And if I turn off the subdivision, you can see it's a very simple piece of geometry. In fact, it's literally just a cube with an extruded portion and some subdivisions and the loop tools used. So to illustrate that, I will create this object. In fact, I've done it in edit mode, haven't I? That's fine. Let's just move that over there. So I've deleted these faces there. And we've just got this right angle now, a couple of faces there. I just realised I did that in edit mode, so I'll split it off as a separate object. In fact, I'll delete those just and start from scratch. So we add firstly you add a solidify modifier to give it some thickness, which is what I did with the other part you can see there just in the background. Click on even thickness to get that nice and even, of course. And high quality normals. Not a huge difference, but it helps. And apply the modifier once you've done that. Now you can see it's a very basic piece of geometry. Now I added some loop cuts with Ctrl R. So I'll add Let's try 4, perhaps. And a couple, excuse me, 2 or 3 in the vertical axis as well. You just move these along a little bit, so do feel free to alt click and select them and then press GG to move them. So what you can do now is you can select individual edges and just position these a bit better before I demonstrate it. So we'll select this edge and create a square like that, and then right click and make sure you've got loop tools enabled in the preferences add-ons. Go to loop tools and choose circle, and that will make those edges in a circle as best it can. And with that, I'm going to bevel those edges. No steps in between, so bring that down to just 1, just like that, very simple. And then with those selected, we can select the faces and then select extrude, or press E for extrude, and just extrude those inwards. Obviously don't go through the back end on the other side. So once you've done that, that's what I want. But if we add a subdivision modifier, of course it's going to average all of the vertices out, so now you get a very blobby kind of mess, which may be what you want, but in this instance I wanted some hard edges, so I selected these edges individually. You can see me struggling to select here because I'm having this bug in 3.4 of Blender. I think it's a bug, it may not be actually, it could be just, maybe it's my mouse, where it's not selecting when I click, so I have to keep clicking and trying all the time. So what I've done there, I've selected these edges and added the mean bevel weight, increased their value to 1. The default is 0, of course. And the mean crease just to harden the edges inside. So with that done, if I just increase that, you can see we've got those not quite working yet. So what I'm going to do is add a bevel modifier, and of course this will work for everything. But then I want to choose the weight as a limit method, not angle, and just play around with the amount, and then we turn on the subdivision modifier. Turn off the wireframe again. You can see now we're getting this much nicer shape being created, just like that. So now you can do the same thing for the edges that run along the outside. The other way to do it is, another way to do this is to select all of the edges that you want to be sharper effectively. So let me just try and select these edges here. So I'm holding down Alt and Shift to make multiple selections of edges. And I'm also going to select, let's just turn off some of these, get rid of the bevel modifier. So we'll select these outer edges that we also want to be hard and sharp. This is why you want to model with simple shapes, because if this was a high poly shape, it would take you forever trying to select these faces and edges and vertices maybe. So keep it as simple as you can, always the best policy. And with that done, you've got all the faces, edges selected. I can click on bevel, set the shape to 1, not 0.5, segments to 2. I just want to add a couple of supporting edge loops either side of those edges that I selected. Excuse me. And that works really, really well. As you can see there, it comes out really nice. So with that part done, let's have a quick review of the head. At some point while I was modeling, I had to go back and widen everything. It was way too narrow. So that's what I did here. So basically everything you see here is using those techniques I just showed you in the previous clip, where I'm adding either a bevel or the bevel weight on edges and applying a subdivision modifier to it. So that's worked out really well. So what can become what looks like a very complex thing is actually in fact just made up of very simple shapes that all come together to make a nice looking model. And here's some of the neck parts. The neck parts were made in exactly the same way that I just showed you. In fact, everything there is made in exactly the same way. So that's the most used technique that I have actually. So there you go. I think that looks pretty cool. So you can add details here like the holes and those little circular cutout or dents, indents, just by using those techniques I just showed you. Very simple, very effective, and you get a really cool result. Those are just some insets that I selected, some faces there. As you can see, it's just insets. Very simple to do. Again, my advice is to keep it simple. Use basic editing tools and modifiers where you can to help you along the way. So there you go. Now let's take a quick look at how I sculpted these jaw parts. Not very difficult. I'm not really a sculptor person. Don't really do much sculpting. I've only tried it a few times in the past. But it does work well in Blender. I think it's getting better all the time. And there's some great features and tools within sculpting that has been added over the last couple of years. So I do encourage you to experiment with sculpting. It's very cool and it's great fun as well. So I just dived in and thought, let's just see how I did this. And again, feel free to leave your comments and stuff, but I'm not the best sculptor. I just did what I had to do to get this to work. So to illustrate what I did in a roundabout way, I'll add a cube. It's basically what I did for those parts of the mouth. I just added a cube and just put it into a very rough block out shape, as I'm doing here. So I scaled it out, maybe put an edge cut in it or something, edge loop, and then just moved around some of the corners. But effectively, this is what I did. Took a very basic shape, added a subdivision modifier, just tweaked it a little bit more to get something roughly like I wanted. Applied the subdivision modifier, and then with the object selected, click on sculpting, and now you can just start clicking away. So there's your brush settings on the right there, and also symmetry is useful to turn on sometimes, so I'll turn that on. Just there, symmetry. And dynamic topology. So this will add and remove polygons and faces as you sculpt in real time. So if I turn on the wireframe, just so you can illustrate that, don't worry about the pop-up that comes up. So I'm just going to click on draw. And if I click in draw now, you can see it's added and it's subdivided those faces. Just increase the strength a little bit. Now this won't add more and more polygons over the same polygons that it's just created, because there's a setting you can change that will determine how many polygons it will add, basically, right? So as you can see, I'm not adding very many. So click the drop down menu, and the resolution is the part that defines and controls how much detail you're getting from your sculpting. So you may not know what this number means, but you can use the eyedropper to get an idea. So that's a resolution of 2.9 there. So I divided by 2, and if I then sculpt, I get roughly the same thing. So let's try relative detail. Relative means that the closer it is to you in the camera view, the more detail you get, basically, the more micro detail you can start sculpting, which is insane. Just be careful, because your poly count will creep up dramatically as you're sculpting. So whenever you're in a sculpting mode like draw or clay or inflate, if you press the shift key, that will go into a smooth mode. So I did that as I was sculpting. I would hold down the shift key to smooth out these perhaps rough edges or hard edges, and then that would then, once I release the shift key, I'm back into drawing mode. And here I'm holding down the control key to get the indentation in the clay as well. So with every tool you use, the control key will do the opposite. So if you're inflating, if you press control, it will deflate. If you hold shift, it will smooth, just like that, as you can see there. So this is what I did, rinse and repeat, just do it over and over again. And you'll get, hopefully, the result that you're after. As I say, I'm not a sculpting expert, but I did learn a bit more about sculpting doing this exercise, especially on the torso, which you can see in the sped up part of the video. So here I'm creating just indentations and crevices along the gums and inner parts of the mouth. I'm literally just making it up as I go along here, so I'm just going by something what I feel looks good, and I would expect to see on something like that. So yeah, use your creative license to do something that's really cool. And switching back to layout mode, I applied shade smooth, and that's basically how I did that. That brings us to the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed that. I had a blast making this. So yeah, for now, thanks for watching as always. If you like my content, leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks for now. Take care. Bye bye.